So we'll revisit a famous question someone asked me Friday night, that regarding the laws of Kiddish. We know there is a mitzvah min ha-Torah to make Kiddish Friday night. But the mitzvah is Zachar Shem HaShabbos L'Kodsho, one of the 10 commandments, which is actually coming up also as well. And the Gemara learns out, Zacharei El Alayayin, the Gemara learns out, and in our practice is we make Kiddish over wine. But how much of Kiddish is really min ha-Torah, and how much of Kiddish is midrabanan? So we have different opinions in the Rishonim. The Rambam's opinion is one fulfills the mitzvah of Kiddish with words alone. When you talk about the praises of Shabbos, B'chnisaso v'yitziaso, in its entrance and its exit, so that's how you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddish in our Torah. There's different opinions in the Bali Tosis. One opinion is that making Kiddish over a cup of wine is min ha-Torah, but actually drinking it is only midrabanan. And a third opinion is even drinking it is min ha-Torah. Zacharei El Alayayin is a real drasha gemura. Halacha l'maisa, we paskin like the Rambam, and we paskin the mitzvah of Kiddish min ha-Torah is fulfilled with words alone. By saying words of praise on Shabbos, one fulfills the mitzvah min ha-Torah. That's what we paskin. So comes along, and there's one other fact, so it's a mitzvah min ha-Torah. So clearly men are chayev in the mitzvah. What about women? Because at first glance it seems to be a classical mitzvah aseh shehazman grama, a classical time-oriented mitzvah. Why? Because the last I checked, you can only make Kiddish on Shabbos. So it's very time-oriented Kiddish. So I would think I go with the general principle of the Gemara, the Mishnah tells us in Kiddushin, a mitzvah aseh shehazman grama, nashim peturas. Yet the Gemara in Brachos on Daf Chaf Amud Beis, as well as Shvuos, I believe also Daf Chaf, tells us nashim chayavos b'kiddish hayom min ha-Torah. Even though Kiddish is a mitzvah aseh shehazman grama, nevertheless it is one of the exceptions to the rule, and a woman is obligated min ha-Torah in the mitzvah of Kiddish. Why is this exception to the rule? So the Gemara makes the famous drasha we say in Friday night davening as well, that Zachar v'Shama b'dibar echad, that we know we have it says in the Torah in Parashas Yisro, Zachar Shama Shabbos L'Kodsho, and in Parashas V'Eschanan it says Shamar. So the Gemara makes the famous drasha, Kol she'yeshnu b'shmira, yeshnu b'zechira. Whoever's included in the commandment of keeping Shabbos is included in the positive mitzvah of Zechira Shabbos, of making Kiddish. So since women can't drive to shul on Shabbos, they can't turn on lights, they can't desecrate the Shabbos, whoever's included in the negatives are included in the positives as well, at least regarding Kiddish. That's a further discussion among the Rishonim. Is it just Kiddish or all the mitzvahs aseh of Shabbos? That's a separate discussion, but definitely Kiddish is clear. They're chayev min ha-Torah in Kiddish based on that's an explicit Gemara. So women, and we have a similar Gemara regarding women's obligation of matzah, Leil Pesach. Not tonight, but Leil Pesach. We know there's a mitzvah min ha-Torah that we have to eat a certain amount of matzah at the Seder. How much a kazayis is, how much we have to eat, when we get close to the Pesach, we'll discuss it. But you have to eat a certain amount of matzah. Again, so it seems to be a classical mitzvah aseh shehazman grama. So I would say women are exempt. Yet the Gemara tells us in Psachim, nashim chayavas, women are obligated in the mitzvah of eating matzah leil Pesach. Why? It's a zman grama. So the Gemara makes a similar drasha. Kol sheyeshno bebal tochel chametz, yishno bekum ochel matzah. There's from the Torah puts the pasuk of not eating chametz next to the mitzvah of eating matzah. So the Gemara makes a drasha, whoever is included in the negative of not eating chametz is also included in the positive of eating matzah. So again, so it's an exception to the rule that women are chayev min ha-Torah matzah. Tosas in Megillah, in the beginning of Megillah, asked the kasha, why do we need a drasha? This is where now we have a principle Af hein hayu ba'oso anes. We know the Gemara tells us regarding Purim's coming up, near Hanukkah, Dalit Kosos, even though they're mitzvahs asesha as man grama, but since they're involved in the miracle, so they're also chayiv. So why don't we say the same thing? I don't need a drasha of kosher yeshtum about tocha chametz nishu b'kom chamatz to say the women were involved in the miracle of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So Tosfos gives different answers, but the bottom line answer is I only know the chayiv midrabanan based on afhein. The drasha tells me that even min Torah women are chayiv to eat matzah le'al Pesach. So we know we have a mitzvah min Torah of Kiddish Friday night, and we have a mitzvah min Torah men and women are chayiv in. So comes along the famous kasha of the Daglam Ravava, the Nod Bihud and others is the general practice is, again it's a little more Bisman Hazeh than it was 100 years ago, but usually the men go to shul and not the women. And even if the women don't go to shul, usually then most women, more women now than before, but most women will assume do not daven Friday night. The issue isn't going to shul, the issue is davening. But usually we associate one with the other, at least some people do. But some people associate with the Kiddish club, some associate with davening, but it's a separate discussion. So either way, so the assumption we're making is if the man davens, whether at shul or at home, and the woman doesn't daven. So the Magen Avraham writes, based on the Rambam, that one fulfills the mitzvah min Torah of Kiddish Friday night when they say the bracha Friday night in Shemon Esrei, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. They're saying special praise of Shabbos. Based on the Rambam, the Rambam that says you fill with words, and the Magen Avraham is extending the Rambam to say, so if that's the case, when we daven Friday night, we fulfill our mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush. So this assumption is if a woman does not daven, so she's still chayiv min Torah in Kiddush, and the general practice is the man makes Kiddush for the wife, for the woman in the household. So the question of Dagam, how could that be? A man already fulfilled his mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush by davening Friday night. A woman is chayiv min Torah. We have a general principle: someone who's only obligated midrabanan cannot do a mitzvah. Someone who's chayiv min Torah. Jeff, you have a kasha?
Yes, even according to Rambam, would the person who's davening who says, saying this morning, would he have to have in mind, I'm now being fulfilled?
Well, you're already coming on to one of the potential answers. Okay. That'll be the Chasim Sofer. But the question is, how it's a kasha on our general practice. No Dibihud, the rights of Dagul Ravava, just have the wife daven at home. Let's settle the problem. Let's have a daven, and that'll be the end of it. But most women don't. So let's assume it didn't happen. So the various answers given. So one is Jeff raised by the Chasim Sofer. The Chasim Sofer raises, I think the Mishnah Berurah quotes it, that we have a general klal in the Gemara, mitzvahs srichas kavana. Actually, it's a machlokas in the Gemara whether mitzvahs require kavana. Of course, as I always point out, you mean you're about to put on your tefillin now, so there's an opinion that says you shouldn't have kavana. So of course, the machlokas is a legal machlokas post facto. The question is, if you put on your tefillin and you didn't have the requisite kavana, they have to put them on again. But everyone agrees that while you're putting them on, you should have kavana. So the question is, are you yotze if you don't have kavana? So that's the machlokas in the Gemara regarding whether mitzvah sprichas kavana. Well, halacha, we seem to paskin on a mitzvah min Torah, yes. Mitzvah sprichas kavana, and you have to go back and do the mitzvah again if you didn't have the requisite kavana. And a mitzvah midrabanan, we are lenient that you don't have to go back. So the Chasim Sofer points out, since we know Kiddish Friday night is a mitzvah min Torah, and according to the Rambam, B'dvarim Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. So usually, first of all, most people Friday night don't think they're fulfilling the mitzvah. They don't even know about this possibility. They think that it's davening. And he says, and for those who already know the shiur, the Chasim Sofer says one should have negative kavana. In other words, or just negative to neutral. As long as you don't have the kavana to think that you're fulfilling the mitzvah of Kiddush, you're not yotze Kiddush. And therefore, when you get home, you're still chayiv min Torah, and therefore it's not an issue. That's how the Chasim Sofer writes. The Minchas Chinuch wants to knock off saying the question doesn't even come off. He doesn't even like the kasha, because he says the assumption's wrong. He says even though it's true the Rambam writes that one fulfills the mitzvah of Kiddush with words alone, but that's true, but what words? Because the Gemara tells us in Arvei Psachim, and no one disagrees, that to fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush Friday night, it's not enough just to mention the creation of the world, Ma'aseh Bereshis, but you also have to mention Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. You have to mention the Exodus from Egypt. So in our classical Friday night Kiddush, we do mention it. But if you look at your Friday night davening, there is no mention of Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. So he says, it's true you fulfill your mitzvah with Kiddush Minat Torah with words, but you have to say the right words. And since there is no mention of Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim in our Friday night davening, the kasha never gets off. And it's true, but a man's not Yotzei, so therefore when a man goes back to, according to the Chasam Sofer, it would work except to have negative kavana. According to the Minchas Chinuch, you're still chayiv Minat Torah. However, they ask, but the Minchas Chinuch does say, when do you have to be careful? On Yantif. Let's say a Friday night, Yantif falls out Friday night, you do mention, we daven tefillah shalosh regalim, you would mention, so then he says we'll have to deal with that question, but he limits the question to more Yantif shechol b'Shabbos than every Friday night, so we don't have to worry about the kasha next week. And there's another famous answer of the Pri Megaddin. The Pri Megaddin has in his Sicha Kolelet, when he talks about the different principles he works with. So we know that they're called Drabanan Kein Daraisa Tikkun. We pattern rabbinical laws after biblical laws. And there are many mitzvahs we have that is a mitzvah in our Torah, and the rabbis tell us to do it in a certain way. So there's a discussion in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, let's say Minat Torah, let's say for instance, the Torah tells us you blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. But the rabbis came along and said, you know what, when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, no shofar today. And that's our practice. So let's say someone goes ahead and blows shofar on Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah Shachol b'Shabbos. Is there any kiyam ha-mitzvah? Is there any fulfillment of the mitzvah? Or it's a zero or even a negative? It's not only nothing. So there is, when the question is, and it's not just it's by lulav, the same shaila, the Gemara talks about if you're sitting inside the sukkah but your table's outside the sukkah, so midrabanan it's no good because we know you're going to follow the food and you'll end up eating outside the sukkah. Let's say you do it, you eat in the sukkah but your table's out. So it's a separate share on this topic, but the issue is once the rabbi said you have to do a mitzvah in a Torah a certain way, does that mean the mitzvah minat Torah you can't do it the way it said minat Torah, or is still some kiyam ha-mitzvah or not? So the Pri Megaddin says that issue over here. He says it's true that minat Torah, the Rambam writes, you fulfill Kiddish with words alone. However, he disagrees with the Magen Avraham. He says, but once the Chachamim said you have to do Kiddish ala yayin, so even to fulfill, not only don't you fulfill your mitzvah midrabanan of not making over wine, but you don't even fulfill your mitzvah minat Torah. Once the rabbi said you have to do Kiddush over wine, if you decide, well, I'm not going to listen to the Takanas Rabbanan, I'm going to make Kiddush not over wine, so the Pri Megaddin raises the issue, so perhaps you're not even Yotzei your mitzvah minat Torah of Kiddush. So that's what he writes. Based on this, we can get another answer to the Dagul Merava's kashas, because so when we make Kiddush Friday night, in davening, we're not making it over a cup of wine. So therefore, since once the Chazal said to make Kiddush over wine, so even minat Torah, we don't fulfill our mitzvah of Kiddush, even if we wanted to. So we have a fundamental, to summarize, so we had, number one, we know men achayev in Kiddush minat Torah, and the Gemara tells us Noshem achayev in Kiddush, even though it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, woman achayev as well. And we have a general rule, someone is only chayav midrabanan and cannot do a mitzvah for someone who's chayav minat Torah. So again, if the woman davens, so then we're on a level playing field. But in most cases, the woman who has not davened ma'ariv and you have, so how could you make Kiddush for your wife? So either you have like the Chasam Sofer that just don't have, it's a problem, hence the only person thinks it's a problem, therefore a woman should daven, that's his solution. The Chasam Sofer says just don't have kavana in your Friday night, it's a problem, and therefore you solve it by not having kavana. The Minchas Chinuch says it's not an issue because you're not even Yotzi Friday night because there's no Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the Pri Megaddin says it's not an issue because you're not Yotzi, because once Chazal said you have to make Kiddush ala yayin, I can't fulfill Kiddish in Shemona Esrei. And that's the famous Rabbi Kiva Eger, who says in Misafik, that's what the Minhag Yisrael, when you come home Friday night, you say Good Shabbos. So he says, Ulai, perhaps according to the Rambam, by saying Good Shabbos, the woman responds Good Shabbos, everyone fulfills the mitzvah in our Torah, and then you're only chayav midrabanan, everybody.